Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Chris Moeller. Thanks for joining us again at the Edge Report. Today, I've got with me Ben Kinney. Ben is here in North Carolina. Very interesting background in publishing and business development, NC State grad, music lover, fellow charlatan. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Chris, thanks for having me, man. Looking forward to living on the edge with you.
Yeah, thanks. So that's it. We're going to go to the edge, hopefully. So enjoyed our little warm-up discussion backstage, so to speak. How's your day? How's your week? What you been up to?
Things are good, man. I was telling you earlier, this week was good for me. Being publisher of the state's business magazine gives me access to a lot of different opportunities. And what I've been doing quite a bit lately is I've been speaking in front of groups and moderating panels and things like that. I don't know about you, but this seems like the time of the year when we're all kind of getting into meetings and summits and things like that. Spring's, full force. I was looking at my March schedule and it's off the charts. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's fun to be able to do it. But earlier this week, I was in Asheville at North Carolina State University's Institute for Emerging Issues Forum. They did it in 3 places in the state this year, and Asheville was one of them. And they always have a big focus on things that are extremely important to North Carolina's culture, economy, and that landscape. And water.
Uh-huh.
And I don't want to say if you can believe it, because of course you can believe it. But the big topic was water and the importance of it for a bunch of different aspects. And it's tailored towards Western North Carolina. So I moderated a panel on leadership, and it was really fun. Really enjoyed it.
Cool. Yeah. I'm passionate about that. I have a geology background, actually, that you might not know about. So I have a pretty interesting perspective on geomorphology. When I look out the window, I see things that a lot of people don't see. And I take a bioregional approach to my whole business perspective. And when you do that, it's really hard not to look at your natural resources. And it's very easy to overlook the ubiquity of the hydrologic cycle and how important it is. But bioregionally, we are very lucky to live in a place where we are in a temperate rainforest in Western North Carolina. And it does rain, even though we're in a drought. Did that come up at all? Like the discussion of like that water as natural resource, or was it more into industry?
It was all over. I got to admit, it was a really interesting group. It was probably about 200 professionals, and they were all over the place, from engineers to economic developers, elected officials, Chamber of Commerce folks. So each person had something different to bring to the table. You got to remember that the area that we were, obviously Asheville, really felt water in its worst extreme with Hurricane Helene. So there was a lot of discussion about how to deal with that. You know something, the panel I was on had some leaders, an environmental leader, at Blue Ridge Conservancy, and we had the mayor of Canton, which if you're familiar
Oh,
with,
Zeb.
yeah, Zeb was great, great guy, great stories. But talk about, a town where he's the mayor of that was totally dependent on the river, totally dependent on the business
The
that was,
mill on the river.
right?
Yeah.
And then that town or that business up and leaves, and what do you do with that? And how do you utilize that natural resource of the river as something different than what a business would want? Maybe it's something, we're talking travel and tourism and bringing people into it, which was good. And finally, I had the great Dale Carroll, who is a former bigwig all across North Carolina for the Department of Commerce, but also Western North Carolina, ran Advantage West, and just a great guy, was talking about the use of water in terms of economic development, how it's a big tool. Some businesses, especially if you're talking about life science companies, water is one of the most important aspects that they need when they're going to move to an area that you just don't think about. You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah. You
the
don't
whole
think about it
thing
till
is
you need it. It doesn't work, right?
right. Yeah, yeah. Reminds me of a great Ben Franklin quote. I think is you never think about water until the well runs dry. You know,
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
true.
It's funny. As you know, we can get into it a little bit here if we want to, but I'm trying to build a much larger fund around stable living, right? Housing as part of that, but really truly an infrastructure play and an energy play. So, big thinking. And when I think big, I was thinking in 100-year interval. And then I met a guy who's a mentor of mine now from Australia. And he's like, no, you got to think in 1,000-year play. And I was like, oh man, I got to worry about my kids today. Like, he's like, no, you got to think 1,000 years out. Then I started listening to the Long Now Foundation and the Merry Pranksters of, the early Silicon Valley days, and Whole Earth catalog and Stuart Brand and Kevin Kelly and all those guys. Now they're telling me I'm supposed to think in 10,000 year increments. So they built a 10,000 year clock. And it's like, guys, like I'm gonna be here for like a minute and a half in that perspective. And they're like, that's the point. It's not about you. It's about collectively us and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 generations ahead. What do we build now that will, that how can we think about the long and what can we do now about it? And it's a really cool framework to have and thinking beyond just the quarter or just the balance sheet or just the fiscal year.
It's tough, man. I'm such a procrastinator. That's a terrible deadline for me.
Yeah,
You know what
the
I mean?
no deadline.
10,000 year deadline, right?
Yeah, well, you're gonna be just fine. You got a beautiful penchant for music, and you're out there viewing people and meeting new businesses every day. So, tell me a little bit about Ben, the business guy. Like, what's Business North Carolina, South Park Magazine, North Carolina Tribune. Like, give the listeners a little bit of understanding because I know your stuff.
Yeah, you and I, we talked a little bit before. As a matter of fact, you were on our chatter with the BNC podcast a couple weeks back, and we talked a little bit about this. And my professional journey and how I got to be where I am, it was not planned in the least. You know what I mean? It's always kind of, is this an opportunity or was I helping something out or it's kind of been a combination of that my entire life. Grew up in Charlotte, went to NC State. I come from a family of educators, my mom and my sister, my grandmother, and I was going to be a history teacher in high school and went my entire time at NC State was based on doing that. I worked part time for the newspaper in Raleigh, the News and Observer, and a newspapers and education program. Think about that. A newspapers and educate to keep it was the goal was to get newspapers involved in the education process. I don't know how well that worked out, but
Did you use a typewriter then?
yeah, oh yes, sir. So but I was doing that part time, so I had my foot in the door at the newspaper there. And I really enjoyed it. My dad was a newspaper man and an editor for Winston-Salem Journal, the Miami Herald, and we came to Charlotte because we worked at Business North Carolina. So I had some time between. I think I had like a half semester. I went like 4.5 years, so I had kind of a semester off. So I couldn't get a teaching job because it was halfway through the school year. So I had to work because I was out of school. So I full time worked advertising, classified advertising at the News and Observer in Raleigh. And it was interesting because that time, the internet was in its infancy. The main way to sell homes, sell cars, help wanted, recruitment ads were all done through classified advertising. It was a
Yeah,
golden age for newspapers. I mean, they
yeah,
were killing it.
you bet.
And so I did that and I ended up I was fairly good at it. I was a pretty good salesperson. You had to talk to folks and not, oversell them and just kind of more of an advisor, I always looked at it as. So I moved my way up the ranks at the N&O for me 10 years up the ranks in terms of became a business salesperson. And at the time I had the opportunity, the company was owned, newspaper company actually owned Business North Carolina, which my dad was publisher of. And through the years, my dad ended up buying it from the newspaper, buying the magazine. And he asked me to work for him and stay in the Triangle area as a salesperson and be the Triangle salesperson for Business North Carolina. I had the same accounts with the newspaper, so I thought, great, I don't have to go work directly for my father, who's a
Right.
pretty hard guy, hardcore. And I was like, this would be good for us. So I did it for about 2 years, and I was married. My wife I met at the newspaper as well, and had a great house in Raleigh. We loved it. It's a great time to be in the business. And then something really fortunate happened. My dad's general manager and controller, great lady who was his right hand, died in a plane crash. Her and her husband had a small Cessna that crashed right after Christmas in 2001. And the board of directors said, Ben's got to come down and take that position over as
Huh.
general manager, and that's what's got to be done. And I wasn't ready for it. My wife was pregnant with our first child. we liked our life in Raleigh. We had great friends, and so I had to move into North Carolina, or move to Charlotte. And Chris, it was the weirdest thing that ever happened. We didn't have a house. We had no place to live, so I ended up having to live with my parents in the house I grew up in.
Uh-huh.
And as luck would have it, my sister was in the same circumstance. So the four of us were living in the house that we all grew up in. I was 30, my sister was like 28, and we were living with my parents, and they were still working too. And here's the weird thing. I went to work at Business North Carolina with my dad, and my sister was teaching at my mom's high school as well. So there
Wow. Talk about 0 degrees of separation sitting around that dinner table. You didn't have anything to say.
we had too much to say, brother. It was hot. We all are very opinionated and, that kind of stuff. And it was just not conducive for a stable environment. So I spent a lot of time running during that time period when I got home from work. So it was crazy. It was school hard knocks for me. I was a salesperson with a history degree, man. And essentially, I didn't know anything about real financial stuff. So I didn't know how to read a balance sheet. I could barely understand what a P&L was. And my dad was just on me. I said he was a hard taskmaster, and he's like, "You work for a business magazine. How do you not know this?" And I was like, "Well, look, sorry, I was just been trying to sell ads and bring revenue in here, Dad." So it was a lot of those
Hmm.
kind of back and forth. Really hardcore piece on family business. But fortunately, I took some classes at CPCC and got some basic accounting knowledge under my belt, and learned the hard way. It was a trial by fire, there was no doubt, because this GM that passed away, it was a December, the year wasn't closed, payroll had not been paid yet, so we had to get everything set, and it was just kind of all hands on deck to get it done. Plus, we were really living with devastation that this beloved mother, if you will, of the company passed away in such a sudden and horrible circumstance. So that was just a crazy time. Not to mention it was the dot-com burst of 2000, 2001, 2002. Financially, it was a challenging time.
Plus you're on the edge, speaking of the edge for the Edge report, plus you're on the edge of the largest boom of innovation, right? So out of the ashes comes fire always, right? So now you got a whole new industry that is this internet thing that you've got to go out and figure out, which is going to disrupt the hell out of your classified ads, which you didn't know yet, which didn't have e-commerce, which is going to change the business of landscape, right?
It was nuts, man. Fortunately for us, we got to have the newspaper. I got out of the newspaper business pretty much just in time. That's when all that stuff started happening. That's when newspapers. I left when they were at their pinnacle, and then things after 2000, 2002, things really started, go downhill for major big city newspapers. So yeah, essentially after that, we basically I was working and I was running a small company. We were agile. We could make some changes when we needed to. And the first things that I noticed is that we were old school. We did long form journalism, really good business stories, and that's been since we're 45 years old. We have really written in depth about companies and people and businesses that make up the state's economy. And we've been true to that ever since. My dad's retired 10 years, but we have just been that way ever since. But one of the things I brought was a little more of a marketing, I think a little more of a marketing um, a role to it. And so we redid our website back in the day. Such we created an email newsletter for daily things. We partnered more with other media companies to kind of get our word out there. We used to have this, you know, put out great content and the people will come. And that was true to a degree in the 80s and 90s. But as more and more people came to North Carolina, I realized they didn't know about Business North Carolina. And there are also other ways to get them that information, right? Just there's a lot of folks that don't necessarily want a print magazine.
Uh-huh.
There still are tons that do, but we got to recognize the fact that we still have great content to get to them. My job was to find other ways to get it in their, either on their desktops, on their phones, those kind of things. So for the past 20 something years, we've taken it to another level to where it's not a magazine anymore. It's basically it's much more than that. It's email newsletters. We do a daily digest email newsletter. We do a daily digest extra 2 times a week with breaking news. It's events. We do a manufacturing conference. We do a rural economic conference every year, and it's podcasts, right? It's that, and as well as all kinds of different things. So We're doing a lot of different things, and we've had ownership. Ownership's changed over the years. We were purchased by a media entity about 10 years ago who used to work. The owner used to work at Business North Carolina back in the day. Great guy. It's the Pilot newspaper in Southern Pines is kind of the head of it, and they've enabled us to invest in a lot of different ways as well to grow those. So it's been fun. It's nice to still. Well, I think we're still relevant in North Carolina, and just be able to get that information out to people. And one of the reasons is, and you know this better than anybody, Chris, and we got a great state that's doing, we've got a lot of people coming into this state, and there's a reason for it. It's a great place to do business. It's a great place to live. It's a great place to raise a family. And I
Yeah,
think people know that.
they do. They do. Well, thank you for framing that. And that's, just for the audience, that's when you and I met first face to face was in Hickory at that small economic development for rural towns. And, that's just a perfect example of the ABCs of business. And it's not what you used to think. It's always be changing. ABCs always be changing. The pivots and your ability to stay agile when you're small and relevant. That's the challenge that a lot of people are faced with, especially now. We're at the advent of a new burgeoning general purpose technology. We're going to see compression. Our relationship with time is changing. Our economics are changing. Our geopolitical landscape is strange. There's a good side to all of this, but change is hard for people. One of the things that we have to support each other with is that perspective of, we're all in it together. We're not hopeless. We're all moving in the right direction, trending towards better every day. And that is something this state does really well. I mean, we're still gaining new residents every day. Our challenges are different. We're infrastructure challenges. How do we support all these people? Right. So I love that you started it with that conversation of the macro infrastructure of energy and water and housing. That's the real one of the real challenges that we face here, right? Is the people coming here and supporting them.
Yeah. Talking about change, and that we're pretty good at doing that. And I spoke to a group last week and mentioned it to them. I think one of the reasons that North Carolina is really good at adapting and changing is because we've had so many different challenges over pretty recent history. At one time we were really known for our manufacturing, our furniture making, our textiles. Those kind of manufacturing jobs were really big. And in the 80s and 90s, with offshoring and policies like NAFTA, those jobs went away. So we took it on the chin, and what did we do? We learned from that. What are we going to do now? Are we going to go try and try with the large scale manufacturing, or are we look into other things like advanced manufacturing? Are we going to look at other industries like biotech? We're big in energy. How do we work with that? And so I think we learn from those things. And the thing about North Carolina is, it seems like when we've had some economic issues, it always seems to affect one place in North Carolina, or one region of North Carolina. So I look back in 2000, in late 90s, early 2000s, the dot-com burst, that really hit the triangle really bad, and they had to learn about how to deal with that. And when we had the great financial, the financial recession that was just massive across the country, Charlotte, man, talk about taking it on the chin. I mean, who would have ever thought you'd see the downfall of Wachovia? You know what I mean? Just this massive bank that was in many instances, the symbol of, like, North Carolina's, like, strength in banking, along with, Nations Bank and or Bank of America, and, that to be gone, well, we learn from those things, and of course, COVID, we learned. So that's kind of an interesting thing. North Carolina has a history of just having these challenges or these mighty headwinds, but having also a great history of, okay, how do we learn from this so it doesn't happen again? And there's so many awesome instances of us doing that, to the point where where we are now with, the best state the best state in the country to be doing business with, what, 4 of the 5 times, always in the top 5, and just that national recognition. It's because we are very adaptable and we work together. We don't work in silos here in North Carolina. If a company wants to come relocate here, it's not just a site selection consultant meeting with the economic developer. You're meeting with the president of the community college
Right.
that's nearby, right?
You
You're
bet.
meeting with other business leaders. They're going to give you, kind of some good things to say about how to work with. You're going to have your county manager there is going to talk about things like water. Just those kind of things are all together. And it's everybody on the same table with the benefit of the region in mind rather than their specific little, silos or fiefdom, so to speak. That's a big change, and North Carolina's done a really good job of adapting to that. So, yeah, that's kind of the biggest change that we're dealing with. The challenge, which is a good one, as you mentioned, is population growth. How do we deal with all these people coming here? How do we house them? And when they come here, how do we deal with the people that are already here?
Mhm. Well, and you've got the only thing constant is change, right? So I'm on my fifth or sixth once in a lifetime economic collapse, right? So savings and loan scandal in the 80s, or whatever. And then we had the dot-com era in the 90s. Then we had 9/11 in 2001. Then we had the, CDO collateralized debt obligations and what happened with the mortgage industry in 2008, 9, and then COVID, and now what, right? So that the whole point is to be resilient, you have to be diversified. And you see that in nature in a lot of ways. Nature doesn't consolidate very well. Nature relies on biodiversity, and that becomes its immunity, so to speak. And that's one thing that I think is really great about North Carolina in general, but also the bioregion of the Southeast, is that there's something for everybody. So we're going to see another shift in jobs as time goes on, right? So now we've got all these people coming, which is great for us right now. But what if they don't have jobs? That's not going to be great. So, it's dynamic, and that's part of it. Is there's a place for everybody. There's a seat at the table, and that's something that this state has done a very good job at, more so than others. Is that the open ear is there first. Sure, let me hear it. What are you thinking? Tell me more. And then we kind of frame that through the lens of what's going on. And your macro perspective that you started with behind the stage of energy, water, and housing, those are the three things that are going to continue to proliferate our challenges for the next at least 2 decades.
You know what the something interesting about what you said in terms of folks coming here, and that's kind of a problem, and might be a bigger picture thing, but North Carolina, when the Great Recession hit, we're talking about 2008, 9, 10, that time period.
Yeah,
North Carolina had some of the highest unemployment in the country. Everybody was scratching their heads like, "What the heck's going on?" I mean, yes, there's been layoffs, but man, not no more layoffs here than anywhere else, quite frankly. Maybe the Charlotte region a little bit, but not nothing out of the realm of, in terms of that. So why are there so many people here who don't have a job? And the reason was this is that we kind of dug into the numbers a little bit. The people that got laid off in North Carolina didn't leave. You know what I mean? Traditionally, they'd go to find wherever the work was, they'd kind of take off and go find work. They didn't want to leave. They liked it here. They wanted to stay. In addition to that, the people that were getting laid off in other places were coming to North Carolina.
exactly.
And so we were taught, people were going, God, what is, from outside looking in and going, God, what is going on in your state, man? That, unemployment is terrible. And we're like, well, it's because people are moving out of your state, moving into this place, man. Come on. So it was, when things got better, we definitely had much more of a qualified workforce to fill a lot of the jobs that were needed. But that's a tough bit of a challenge. And like you said, with those, those core, you know, foundations, holy triumvirate of power, housing, and water. How do you accommodate those folks? So we've done a pretty good job of doing that, but we still got these challenges because there's still people coming in here, and we've still got some places in our rural communities, and we talked a lot about this in Western North Carolina, where those folks need some help as well because there's not many people coming into those areas. In some areas, there's more than there were, but they still have challenges on their own as well. They need business and industry as well to come in and, kind of create a foundation. So, yeah, having a lot of people come in here is a great thing, but it kind of brings this other set of challenges to the table.
It does, because then you have to support those folks, and that requires basic infrastructure and civil service and all the things. One of the things that I think is really interesting, we're 500 and this might be not right, but 23 or 24 days into Helene recovery, and I was actively part of that. I was at our family farm in Grayson County, which is just north of Ashe County, literally spitting distance over the border, and found myself on the response and recovery team, because I had to be. A lot of people came up unexpectedly, thinking that it was going to be a rain event, not a hurricane. very ill prepared to be coming into a tragic hurricane story and, wearing a pair of loafers with a bottle of wine and a box of sandwiches because they paid for the Airbnb and it was just going to be a rainy weekend, but let's go anyway kind of thinking, right? So, and now what I've realized over the last couple of years with my work out there, research, listening sessions, feet on the ground kind of work that I've been doing is that every hill and every holler is different and every one of them has a different need. And I've come to realize that really what we need to do, the difference between knowledge and wisdom, knowledge will tell us how to build a bridge, but wisdom will tell us where to build it. And that's really what I'm starting to see with Western Piedmont Council of Governments and High Country Housing and Land of Sky. These groups are coming together rather than fracturing, they're coming together. And that's a really powerful concept, is just bringing together these resources and building these bridges. Do you have any work or insight with the councils of government across the state?
It's funny you say that because I was at this event and Nathan Ramsey with Land of Sky was there. It's funny. He basically epitomized what you were saying. So we were
Well,
at
he
an
was in my
event.
mind when you said that,
Yeah.
just so you know, I was literally thinking of him.
I went and saw him and said, "Hey man, good to see you again." And I met, and immediately what he does with me is he's like, you need to talk to this guy right here. You need to talk to this guy right here." And he introduced me to like 2 or 3 folks, one representing community college. I think it's AB Tech, and another guy who I met who's really good, who represents North Carolina State and their weather program that they're doing in Asheville, which I had no clue about, which was great for me because that's another resource for our magazine that we can share with folks. But it was really nice but that's what those folks are doing, and they're not just doing it in the western part of the state. Folks are doing it all over now. They're like, "You need to meet this person," and they know why because when I get introduced to someone, what they want to do is they want us to, "This is someone you probably need to cover," and by coverage, what they mean is, "This is someone that business leaders and decision makers in North Carolina need to know about, and they probably don't because they're in this region." You know, everybody in this region might know about them, but everybody in the state needs to know about what this person is doing because they're doing some sort of project in some way or another is going to affect another project in another part of the state. And that's what we've always tried to be at the magazine itself is how can we make the information we get out entertaining, useful, and applicable? That's the key thing is how can I use this information I'm getting reading about some guy in Macon County or, and know about what's going on in Morehead City. Those kind of things. What's this entrepreneur doing? Should I be doing something similar like that at the beach? Or this guy has this issue with his manufacturing line. I had that happen with me. I should get in touch with him. That's kind of what we've been doing in this as well. And I think that our folks that are running our economic development groups, running our organizations and associations, I think they're doing that so much more and so much better these days than it was in the past.
Yeah, NC Commerce has gotten strong in our state, our homes. The Carolina 100 out of Chapel Hill, their school of government's doing a really good job. In like looking at social problems and fiscal problems and infrastructure problems as one, not
Well,
as
it's not
three.
together.
Well, they're inextricably connected. When we need to start looking at things through the lens of an operating system or an ecosystem, because we all rely on all of this stuff, right? It's not just personal interest. This is a great story, but it's how does it impact other people and how does it connect to other people? And I'm sure that is probably a theme for you guys too, is how do we tie this together in what we're reporting? Not just reporting it. That's the easy part. That's knowledge, right? Wisdom is how to connect people. So, that's one thing that I think you guys always do a great job with. And kudos to you for especially the in-person events and the opportunity to network and sort of press flesh, so to speak, because we are so divided digitally. We're doing our work and we're separated. But when we come together and we have a panel and we have a discussion, and we have an opportunity to shake hands and meet, that's the magic, right? That's where the wisdom comes into the room.
Yeah, and to bring folks with different viewpoints in together as well, which is key. And it's kind of we have an event like that, sometimes it's kind of hard to do. You know what I mean? Because no one, we're in such a society now where I think folks they want to hear. I don't know if I'm not going to say folks want to hear everything that they agree with. In social media, I think that's the truth. But I think at events, people are kind of, how can I put it? If you bring together people of a different opinion together, I think there's a little bit of fearfulness there.
Mhm.
It might make people feel, it might make our attendees feel a bit uncomfortable, or that kind of stuff. And I think they should feel a little bit uncomfortable, or at least, not terribly uncomfortable. But you know what I'm saying? To have an outside opinion and have somebody think about something and such. And we try to do that. Not have like bare knuckle fistfights on stage or anything, but just people that think differently or have different ideas on how to approach something. And I think it really helps because we need more of that. I think we need more of that in the state. I think we definitely need more of it in the country. And these events are ways to do that as well. Hey, I've got a real quick question for you. I want because we talked a little bit about affordable housing. That's your wheelhouse right now, and I've been asked about it. And just it's become a how do we call it? What keeps you up at night kind of response to a lot of people, right? And it doesn't matter where I go. It's become one of those things. Is what are the things your challenges you see, with all these folks coming here as we discussed. I don't see a statewide solution for that, or I don't hear much about statewide approaches to that, and that's probably for a reason. But I'm hearing a lot more about local and regional approaches to it that we point to, as well. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, so, thank you for flipping the mic, by the way.
It's on my mind.
Yeah, no, fine. No, like, fair enough. That's what we should do because, yeah, so I sort of have a macro philosophy on this. So I got to start wide and I'll try to get as narrow as I can. The quick answer to your question is no, we do not. But we can't just stop there. We have to start with why. My macro philosophy on affordable housing is that it's encumbered money and it's all based on subsidies. So it's borrowing and borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. So we're either borrowing capital or we're borrowing services or we're borrowing time. And we're not really paying for anything now. We've borrowed all of it out. And that's part of the problem when you have a disruption in fiscal policy that says we're going to cut that budget in half. We're going to take your capital stack that had 5 or 6 or 7 layers of encumbered money and unstable money and reduce it in half. Everybody runs around and tries to sharpen their pencil and say, okay, well, we still need to build because the housing problem doesn't go away. We still need more housing, but it's an economic problem. It's actually not an inventory problem. And that's my macro philosophy. Now, if we're trying to spur economic development, we call it an inventory problem because we want to build more, build, 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 build. The problem is that I build and you can't do it at market rate right now without subsidy. So the traditional housing market as we know it uses encumbered financing. And that's part of the problem is we need to come at it more from an isolationist perspective. Like the state of North Carolina could come up with a way to not rely on federal dollars and then disperse that amongst the communities so that we can create stability without centralization. And the whole country relied on affordable housing dollars to come out of Washington, D.C. So, going back to our analogy about water, that pipe got turned off about 18 months ago, or at least got turned down, but there was water in the whole system. And we didn't realize it until our pressure dropped at our house. And we were like, ooh,
What's
why is
going
the
on?
water not working? So yeah, that is an issue and it is definitely squarely where we're working, but we have to start macro philosophically on what are we trying to do and why. And there's no easy answer to that.
It's interesting. So, do you think that people are really going to start to feel the effects of that turning down pressure of water, so to speak, even more so as we get further and further down the road into
If
these
they take
times?
a traditional roadmap to affordable housing, they've already felt it.
Hmm.
And what you hear is nothing pencils because the subsidies are so high and so dependent that a market rate developer can't come in. It has to work through a public private partnership. You have to release it federal encumbered dollars. And that's not something that this system was ever built on. When we started affordable housing 50 years ago, it was built on subsidies. we start the very it's like Jenga game, and I use this analogy a good bit too. We're sitting down at the table playing Jenga, right? You and I. The question isn't, is that thing going to fall over? It's which move is it and whose turn is it going to be? You know? And when you remove half of the pieces of the Jenga table, things start to get a little wonky, right? And it's not all bad. We do need to rethink systems, always be changing the ABCs of business. We will figure this out. And that's why I feel so comfortable and rest assured that the state of North Carolina will figure this out, because we still have the resources. We still have folks coming in. That mobility is still happening. We've got that energy coming to town. We've got businesses coming to town, and we've got smart people at the table. So workforce development's part of it. The new version of education's part of it. We just need to rewrite the financial book and balance the balance sheet.
Yeah, and I think our state's got to, like, as hey, we just talked about this. Our state's got a really good history of being able to identify a problem and figure out how to solve it.
Yeah, and I'm grateful to be a part of those conversations. Like I said, NC Impact, our state, our homes. They've been working on this for the better part of a year.
Mhm.
Our last meeting is next week, Thursday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And it's kind of like I've been talking to a couple of the folks that are running it. It's like, well, it's not over. Like we just started. Like we can't. If the program ends like that, we can't let that end. So like we just gathered together all of the people from all 100 counties and collectively got the feedback and had the listening sessions of what the issues are. So we started there with our discovery process. Now we really need to say, okay, let's put the pieces of puzzle together. We have all the resources we need right here. Let's just reassemble the puzzle so that instead of pulling the pieces out of the Jenga table, we're putting them back in.
That's cool. Very cool.
Yeah. So music. Ben Kinney's a big fan of music. That's what got me onto your podcast, because I post on Sundays are for vinyl. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Man, I love it. I'm not gonna I just have, it just growing up and yeah, I mentioned something to another, podcaster, believe it or not, about my roots in terms of growing up and kinda how I have raised my kids. It's interesting. Yeah, my parents were extremely young when, they had me, um, and, the 19 and 20, which is really young time, right? Still in college and stuff like that, so I always like to say, children raise children, so to speak, which had its ups and downs, as you can imagine. So, as they were growing up, so were we, you know what I mean? And this was during the '70s.
Yeah, sure.
70s and '80s and such, and so my parents had a very healthy appreciation of different kinds of music, all different kinds, and because I think, they were kids, they weren't cranking up and that probably during the '70s there wasn't the amount of children's affiliated music as we have these days, but, we listened to whatever they did, so I was getting very healthy doses of contemporary and rock music at the time. So a lot of Crosby, Stills and Nash, a lot of Joni Mitchell, a lot of Jackson Brown, a lot of Warren Zevon, a lot of Linda Ronstadt from my mom, and a lot of classical music and opera from my mom. So it was just background music and filtered in, and my sister and I really dug it, And so fast forward, I went on and got started listening to my own things, had my own turntable and all this kind of good stuff, and just I've always been listening to it while I was doing something. When I lived in South Florida back in the day, my daily Saturday we had a swimming pool, my Saturday ritual was cranking up my vinyl copy of Men at Work, Business as Usual, and vacuuming the pool, it was just doing that, mowing the yard and listening to David Bowie's Let's Dance on my Walkman, right?
Yeah.
Just always listening to music while I was doing something, and then, fast forward, just going to concerts when I at a probably earlier age than I should have, but just seeing some great shows and appreciating it. It's just so it's always been there for me. And so I've incorporated it into, what we do with Business North Carolina. I do something called the Daily Digest on Fridays. I basically say have something for your weekend listening pleasure and put out, something that maybe people are, especially our readers, business news readers across the state get to listen to. I get some really good feedback from it. People really enjoy it. In terms of raising my own kids, I kinda did the same thing, our 2 boys we're not listening to the Wiggles as we're driving the thing 'cause I'll drive this car into a telephone pole,
Right. Right.
I can't do it. I hear parents do it, and God bless them, but look, if the kid that well, our kids will whine so much, you know what? That's why I'm gonna crank this Led Zeppelin
Yeah,
up.
that's what the volume button's for.
That's why I'm turning it to 11, baby, and so I won't be able to hear you. So, but I did that, and my kids dug it. As a matter of fact, my oldest Jackson used to go to, in high school, he'd go to, they go to parties and stuff like that, and he'd get on the house music and start cranking up some Zepp or some Rush or, those kind of things. And, the dad would walk in and go, "How the hell do you know this, man?" He's like, "Oh, yeah, I've been listening to it my whole life." But one of the best things about music, Chris, and one of the coolest things that I've experienced since I have 2 young men now, is I've appreciated they've turned me on to what they're listening to.
Absolutely.
So I never would have heard of Goose. I never would have listened to Billy Strings.
I just took my son to his first Goose concert when they were
Great
here in
show.
Charlotte.
Yeah, they believe me, and I'm telling you, the best thing was, I guess it was about 5 or 6 years ago. We were out on the beach just hanging out, and Jackson said, my oldest, he was like, "Dad, I think you'd really like these guys," and cranked up Goose, and I was like, "I love this." You know what I mean? I said, "This is it," and so his mom and his mom loved it too. So, hell, what did we do? His mom and I went to Red Rocks and saw him in Colorado
There you go.
right after that. So that's such a wonderful thing, and to be able to go to a show with your kids and not drag them,
Yeah, it's a
that
gift, isn't it?
for them
It's a
to have a good
gift.
yeah, it's just a wonderful experience, and I think music does that, and I think music just brings people together. You know,
Yeah,
that's something where you can disagree and have very heated arguments, but it's a fun time. Who's better, Neil Peart or John Bonham? You know what I mean? That kind of a deal, and, just you could talk for hours about those kind of things, and that's where it's a level playing field where there's no political affiliation, there's no class or anything like that. It's just, man, it's just people. It's the one place where people can get together and enjoy it.
especially the energy of the room when you're at a live concert. I mean, a lot of
Nothing like
folks, they don't know what that energy feels like, but when everybody's there for a common reason and it's really just about the music and you have all these collective souls in the room, you and I are kindred spirits in that way. I grew up very similar, listening to everything. My folks always had music on. They were a little bit more along the folksy hippie side of world, very similar to you. My parents were pretty young when they had my sister and I, so there was a lot of James Taylor,
yeah.
a lot of singer-songwriter type of work, even Neil Diamond and Barbara Streisand, and, the Southern rock stuff wasn't so much. I was born and raised in Connecticut, but, moving more even towards, Crosby, Stills and Nash for sure, and even I got into Fish. Fish is the Goose, right? And because I had an ear for the Dead when I went to boarding school, you kinda can't go to boarding school and not get introduced to Jerry Garcia. They go on hand in hand. But then moving to North Carolina, in 2004, I didn't realize the connection to music that is so rich, and our farm is up on the crooked road on 58 in Virginia, and that's really where so much American music, Americana music was born here. And what an awesome journey to go down that path and realize like the birth of bluegrass and how interwoven it was with church and community.
Man, this place, if you really dig deep, you can find some folks that are from here or were born here, and you're like, "Good night." Talk about some serious, some music coming there. I mean, think about it. Obviously, Doc Watson,
Oh yeah.
incredible from the mountains. Oh, but man, we have John Coltrane, right?
Yeah.
John Coltrane was born in Hamlet, but I think was raised in around the High Point area and stuff like that. Are you
Yep.
kidding me? I
Well,
mean,
I mean, James
jazz.
Taylor. James Taylor spent half of
James
his time
Taylor,
here.
right?
Randy
Yes.
Travis, like Eric
Yeah.
Church was up in the
Charlie
mountains.
Daniels, man.
Yeah,
Charlie
Luke
Daniels.
Combs, the Abbott brothers. Like we go on and on. You already
It's
said John Coltrane, right?
it's so different in the sense that's all very different types of music, but all coming from this one state, which is just so unique, I think, and that's one of the coolest things about our state. We've got so many cool venues to check out live music as well. Hey, really quickly, I'm gonna turn the table on you one time. What was your first concert and what's your favorite concert?
That's a good question. I was going to ask you the same thing.
I'll answer it after you.
My first concert, I was with my parents, and it was a outdoor amphitheater called Tanglewood in Massachusetts, and it was James Taylor.
Nice.
That was with my parents. It was a picnic blanket kind of show. That was my first one. My that's So that's my first answer. The The next one was the weirdest concert I was ever at. I can't remember which one came first, but I saw Steve Miller Band live in New Haven, Connecticut. But then I saw George Michael. Do you remember George Michael's Faith Tour when I Want Your Sex was part of?
Man, he was the top of his game then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I saw George Michael. Those are my first 3 shows that I remember. Yeah, Steve Miller, George Michael, and James Taylor. Talk about weird different, right?
I hear you, man. Well, that's that. Hey, that's our musical taste, right?
Yeah.
So
How about
my
you?
my first was what my dad worked for, and I didn't go to this thing, but my dad worked for the Miami Herald, and so we lived in South Florida for um, about 5 years in the early '80s. And I hung out with a lot of older kids who could drive when I was like 14, and so I got to go to a bunch of different things. As a matter of fact, um, I got to see Prince, the Purple Rain tour at the Orange Bowl on Easter Sunday, which was good. It was great. But that wasn't one. The first one they took me to was U2's Unforgettable Flyer tour.
Awesome.
And I wasn't, I liked U2. I knew who they were, but I didn't, I went, I just went along for the ride, for the most part. And it blew my mind. Great show. I mean, these 2 people got in a fight in the front row, and Bono brought them both on stage and made them shake hands and hug. That kind of a thing, right?
Yes.
Great show, great show. And the best is it's best. That's a tough one, I'll tell you. But the best show that I think I have seen, because my expectations were they should have been. I've been to a bunch that I didn't have high expectations, and they just blew my mind. But the best one that the expectations were there and it paid off was I'm a huge. My favorite band of all time is Led Zeppelin. Jimmy Page is my favorite guitarist of all time. He's sloppy, he's crazy, but the '70s rock god is, if you put a picture of it, it'd be Jimmy Page in his crazy suits with a dragon all on him and stuff like that, and that's it. But I've seen Robert Plant, I even saw John Paul Jones, but I've never seen Jimmy Page in concert before. And so he was coming to, I was living in Raleigh. He was coming with the Black Crowes. And it was Jimmy Page, Black Crowes, and they played they played Black Crowes and Led Zeppelin hits. And it was loud, crazy, great show. And it was on July 4th, 2000. And the first song they cranked up with was Independence Day from Led Zeppelin 3. Never heard it before live, of course, and it just blew my mind. And the whole show was just like that. I mean, my ears were bleeding, good stuff, and it fulfilled everything I needed to see. So, yeah, that was kind of a
Yeah. I couldn't tell you. I avoided the question, so I guess I should return to it. I don't. I just don't have one favorite because
I
I.
know, yeah,
It's so hard. I mean, I would say that like probably one of the ones I'm the most appreciative that I got to be at was I got to see the Grateful Dead in '94 at Giant Stadium.
nice.
To be able to like to be a part of that whole world. I was not a Deadhead, but I did not miss Jerry, and I did get to feel that energy of that community and be a part of that,
Same deal. Yeah,
whatever you wanna call it, circus, I guess is probably the best thing to call it.
yes.
But I think what my some of my best memories were more in the festival kinda world. Did
Yeah,
you ever go to any of the,
further.
Southern Ground stuff that Zach Brown did down in Charleston?
No, I didn't. That's a I didn't that was later.
It was
We
relatively in the last 10 years.
Yeah, the festivals I went to were much more. I mean, obviously went to, Lollapalooza,
Mhm,
back in the day. I went to the first one, then second I think I went to the first 4,
mhm.
back in the day. The Further Fest was just kind of a dead deal. Um, yeah, all these oh gosh, there were a couple of them that were cranking out back then, like with Blues Traveler and, oh gosh, who else was those kind of jam bands back then, which were fun, and enjoyed them. And like you did, I mean, I went to the Dead. I was part of the circus for a little bit with the Dead, when they came around North Carolina. Saw them about 5 or 6 times when they hit close by. Best one of those was Greensboro Coliseum, which I'll be honest with you, it's one of the best places to see a show
Oh, yeah.
in North Carolina. It's big, it's groovy, it's got a history to it. The sound is outstanding. Every seat's a good seat, and it's just something little known fact, Chris, that you got to know, man. The food is good there. You know what I mean?
The food really
Good
good
food,
there.
yeah. Also, Asheville's got, their Harrah's, not the resort, but, Harrah's, venue in Asheville downtown is great, good food. That's an important thing.
Yeah, like, I've always thought, Ben, that my life has been set to a soundtrack for sure, and,
Yeah,
I've got a lot of my friends that, various times in life, things are good, things are bad, and I can check in with people pretty quickly and just ask them what they're listening to and get a pretty good sense of where they are in their head. So, it's to me, it's energy, and that's music is important. That's what gets us through things, whether it needs to be through sad and melancholy or fun and upbeat or whatever it is. To me, in our generation, that is kind of how we grew up. We had keys to get ourselves in the door, and we drank out of water hoses, and we came together at concerts and shared music. And then we had Walkman, and then we had the CD player, and then we had the removable face car plate in your car, and we had a kicker box in the trunk, and then we had the iPad or the iPod, and then we had
iPod.
so we in vinyl all the way through. So we've the one thing that has been constant through my life has been music, and I know you and I shared that. So let's switch gears for a couple more minutes, and then we'll head out. What's next? What's on your runway? What are your I've got a ton of conferences coming. You have a ton of conferences coming. What where are you going?
So, yeah, we do. As I mentioned, I think you asked me off, mic, we said, "Well, what's going on with lately and such," and I mentioned we're starting off conference season, and so I am fortunate to have been asked to be either an MC or moderating panels or whatnot in some different conferences across the state. I was in Asheville last week. Later this month, I'll be actually heading to New Bern for economic development conference there, and then I'll be attending a couple ones as well for economic developers in Greensboro. So this is the time for it. And in addition to that, Business North Carolina has its large MFG Con manufacturing conference in April in Winston-Salem, and we've got a leadership series, which I think you'll be participating in Raleigh in May.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, we got to get the magazine out and get our sales together and stuff like that. And as I forgot to mention, and it's just as important to me as BNC, is that I'm also publisher of a arts and culture magazine here in Charlotte called South Park Magazine, and we're getting ready for a really big initiative with that this spring as well that will be launching in a couple of weeks. So, man, I wear a lot of hats. I like doing it. It's fun. It's a little stressful sometimes. You have to really concentrate because it's if you don't have. I mean, and I don't have my concentration level is it has a limit to it, and I get distracted very easily. So, I mean, I'm one of those guys that comes into the office and I have to write down everything I need to get done that day. You know what I mean? Because if I don't, I won't get one of them done, or I'll get two of my six things done because follow. I'll be working, but it's just something else that takes my attention away from it and such. But
Yeah, like this, like me asking you to do this right in the middle of your
I
day.
wrote this on my calendar, brother.
Well, I appreciate you sharing the time with me for sure because there's a science fiction author by the name of Robert Heinlein, and
Hmm.
he wrote a very famous line: "Specialization is for insects." And I believe that you're a generalist. You're all over the place like I am, and you do think in systems and cycles, and you share that, and you're eloquent in the way that you share that. So I appreciate that about you for sure. And we're gonna bump into each other a bunch. I think like it sounds like there's a lot of things that you were in Nashville on Tuesday and Wednesday. I was in Nashville on Wednesday and Thursday. Like we just didn't know. So maybe we need to do what the kids do now and like turn on our location for with Snapchat or something or Life 360, so I know where Ben is. We can maybe find some music and have a cold beer in town when we're crossing paths.
We'll definitely do it, my friend. I appreciate it. And I said this before, but we were talking about the challenges of federal funding for housing and things like that, and what you're doing are like is a big part of that solution. And it makes me breathe a sigh of relief, or a little bit easier. Let me put it that way, knowing that you're out there doing what you're doing for North Carolina and for regions in it. Thanks,
Thanks,
man.
man. We've all got kids and we've all got futures, and I don't know how I'm going to get mine out of the house unless I build a housing solution that works. So it's completely self-serving.
Now it comes out. There it is.
No, no, no. But at the end of the day, it really is, of utmost importance right now. We're going to continue to see, cost burden structures as wage trails market. So, we've got some work to do. Ben, better together, as they say. Appreciate your resources and your time and your energy around what you're doing. And drawing dots and building bridges, and let's just keep on going upward, onward and upward, but always forward.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Thanks for joining us.